The Elf Village. Nicholas looked around him as slowly the hundreds of colours floating in the air became less ghostly and more real, more intense and vivid and solid. Nicholas watched as the colours that had before been floating as free as a gas in the air formed themselves into lines and shapes, squares, triangles, rectangles, roads, buildings. A whole village appeared out of the air. The Elf Village. They were standing on a street full of small green cabins. There was another road, a bigger one cutting into it from the east. Nicholas looked down at the ground. There was still snow. That hadn't changed. He cast his eyes along the wider road, heading north in front of him. On each side of the road stood buildings, timber framed with snow-covered roofs. Nicholas saw that one of the buildings had a giant wooden clog hanging outside it. Another had a little spinning top painted onto a sign. A toy shop, maybe. Beyond that was the lake Little Noosh had told him about, like an oversized oval mirror, which was right next to a field full of reindeer. Blitzen had noticed this too, and was looking over with interest. To the west, before the wooded hills, was a large round dark tower pointing to the sky. Directly to the north was the place that Little Noosh had been pointing towards, Elfhelm Village Hall, made of dark, almost black timber. It was by far the largest building in the whole village. Not as tall as the tower, it was only 2 stories high, but wide and with around 20 windows, which glowed with light. Nicholas could hear singing, and the smell of something sweet and wonderful was wafting from the direction of the hall, something he hadn't smelt in over a year. Gingerbread. If anything, it smelt even better than it had done outside the baker's shop in Kristinanka Punky. Wow, Elfhelm, my father was right. It's just how he described it. I like your hat, said Little Noosh. Thanks, said Nicholas. He took the hat off and looked at it. It's my father's hat. He was on an expedition to Elfhelm. I wanted to know if he had made it. He was with 6 other men. He was called... But Little Noosh started excitedly talking over him. Red is my favourite colour, after green and yellow. I like every colour, really, except purple. Purple makes me feel sad thoughts. That's where we live, she told him. She pointed towards a red and green cabin a small way in the distance. It's wonderful, said Nicholas. But I also wondered if he'd seen a mouse. Yes, shouted Little Noosh. Father Topper quickly covered her mouth with his hand. Okay, human child. Now you've seen Elfhelm, you'd better take your reindeer and go, said Father Toppo. Whatever you expect to find won't be here. Blitzen nudged Nicholas's shoulder as if he understood the new urgency in Father Toppo's voice, but Nicholas stayed where he was. I came to find my father, he said. I've travelled over 1,000 miles. Blitzen and I are not just going to turn around and go back. The old elf shook his head. I'm sorry. It's not wise for a human to be here. You must go back to the south. It's for your own good. Nicholas looked into Father Toppo's eyes and pleaded. My father is all I've got. I need to know if he made it to Elfhelm. He could be a pet, suggested Little Noosh. Father Toppo patted the elf girl on the head. I don't think humans like to be pets, Little Noosh. Please, I'll come here peacefully. I just want to know what happened to my father. Father Toppo considered. I suppose, given the season, there might be a chance you could be welcomed. This excited Little Noosh. Let's take him to the hall. I won't cause any trouble, I promise, said Nicholas. Father Toppo gave a quick glance over to the tall, circular tower in the west. Trouble doesn't always have to be caused. It's sometimes already there. Nicholas had no idea what this meant, but he followed the elves as they walked in their clogs towards the wooden hall beyond the lake. They walked onto the broad shopping street, passing a sign that declared simply, the main path, and the clog shop, and a bakery with smoke-stained windows, and a toy and sleigh shop, with a poster advertising lessons at the School of Sleighcraft. He also passed a crooked black-tiled building with windows made of ice. The Daily Snow, read the sign outside. The main elf newspaper, explained Father Toppo, full of fear and nonsense. There were 3 copies of the newspaper piled high outside. Little Kip still missing, was the headline, and Nicholas wondered who Little Kip was. He was about to ask, but though they were small, the elves were fast walkers, and they were already some way ahead. He and Blitzen were struggling to keep up. What's that building? He asked. The tall tower. Look, said Father Toppo, changing the subject. That's the North Pole. He pointed to a thin green rod sticking out of the ground. Little Noosh spoke up. Do you think Father Vodo will be kind? I think it will be all right, said the old elf. Come on, little Noosh. We elves are kind and welcoming in our hearts. Well, we always used to be. Even Father Vodo knows that. Copy the front page of the paper. Little Kip's still missing. Nicholas was confused. Father Toppo? Tippo? Toppo, the old elf corrected him. Father Toppo, sorry. I just wanted to ask if... Here you are, Blitzen, exclaimed little Noosh. They had reached the clear icy lake. Just beyond it lay an open field where 7 other reindeer were happily chewing the lichen from the trees. Do you know if my father... Father Toppo ignored him and called out to the reindeer. Oh, dearlings, come here. Here's a new friend. Meanwhile, little Noosh was back to talking about her favourite colours. I quite like indigo. It's much nicer than purple and crimson and turquoise and magenta. Blitzen looked behind Nicholas and nuzzled his shoulder. He's a bit antisocial, Nicholas exclaimed to Father Toppo. But one of the reindeer, a female, came over and gave Blitzen the gift of some grass. For a moment, Nicholas thought he saw her feet actually leave the ground. A gap between where the reindeer's body ended and where the shadow began. But maybe he'd just imagined that. Ah, that's Donna, said little Noosh. The kindest of all. Little Noosh started pointing at all the other reindeer. And there's Comet, with the white streak on his back. And Pretzer, he's so funny skipping with Cupid. Cupid will lick your hand off if you let him. Oh, and the dark one, that's old Vixen. She's a big grumpy thing. And that one is Dadzer and Dasher, who's the fastest of the lot. Are you okay, boy? Nicholas asked Blitzen. But Blitzen was already off making friends. Nicholas noticed that the scar on Blitzen's leg had totally healed. Once Blitzen was grazing contentedly. They walked on, past a sign pointing west to the wooded hills where the pixies live. The music got louder, and the scent of gingerbread stronger, and a sense of fear mixed with a strange excitement until they'd reached the door of the old village hall. Oh, and do you know what day it is, don't you? Said Father Toppo, with a nervous smile. No, I don't even know the month. It's the 23rd of December, 2 days till Christmas. This is our Christmas party. The only party we're allowed now, but not as good as it used to be because dancing has been banned. Nicholas couldn't believe he'd been away that long, but there were even harder things to believe, as he was about to find out. End of chapter.